Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury.
Electrifying.
Yes, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cannon Podcast. I am here with my boy. We are kind of sad. It is not the result that we hoped for. It is not the game that we hoped for, and there was a lot of fallout from the game, as usual. But I'm here with my friend, my fellow nerd, my fellow tactico, Mr. Rohan Jivan. How are you, good sir?
Okay. Could be better. Could be worse. But yeah.
You know, we had done a self-plug, a director's box phone in right after the game. And you know what? I felt okay at that. We have some really beautiful people as part of the community. So maybe a quick plug. If you guys do enjoy the content, of course, you can drop in and become a director's box member where we do monthly phone-in calls. And, you know, there was just some amazing stories that people are sharing and, you know, just amazing people. And being able to connect with you guys one-on-one, talk to us directly is something that I think is special for all of us involved. So if you guys do like it, you can click down the link down below. You can start a 7-day free trial and choose what kind of membership you do like. But enough of the self-promo because I wanted to do that instead of talk about the game. But we are here. Give me your first responses kind of after the game. I know we're a day later. We're trying to reflect on what happened. Where's your head at in terms of the game in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, what you get on the timeline and the general discourse that came from it, I think naturally you get that feeling where, and we said it before, right? In before the season pods, where it will feel like every time Arsenal don't win a game in the Premier League, everything has been compounded and everything's built up in this frustration because, again, like last season, the feeling amongst Arsenal fans and everybody is if Manchester City weren't going to win it, it should be Arsenal, and then Liverpool go on to win it. And then this season, it's kind of like I said, that feeling is compounded now. It's like, okay, now we absolutely definitely need to win it. And every single obstacle that we find ourselves hitting with the results will lead to that tension. And I feel like that's the feelings that I'm getting from the timeline that I got. My own perspective, I'm frustrated because of the way that we lost in the sense of the goal that we conceded, really, that decided proceedings. You know, I always feel in football that there's ways to lose, and I felt like the way that we lost, I personally believe, and we'll get into it, the game plan was solid. It was a solid game plan. But ultimately, when you have a game plan of that kind of molds, sometimes the margins will dictate, and unfortunately for us, the margin that dictated was a foul that Zubimendi made, which, by the way, Liverpool did quite well to work that specific scenario to get the ball in there. And then the Zubimendi foul led to the free kick, which in the end was the deciding factor of the game. And that's the frustration I had because I didn't think that this team deserved to lose. You know, so yeah, like raw emotions because I've not watched it back. I know you've watched it back, so it's.
I've watched it back, and I've become more fervent in my beliefs that it was an incredibly 50-50 game against two title challengers that was ultimately decided by a moment of magic in which we could have argued one of our moments could have gone our way. And, you know, I have a look at it where really the first half I maintain we were very dominant. And I'll even use that where we were dominant with our territory. We were dominant with the types of chances that we were able to carve open for Liverpool that didn't necessarily translate to good enough quality shots on targets. But nonetheless, still got shots on target, whereas Liverpool didn't have a shot on target until basically the 35th minute. And to do that at Anfield is not something that I've seen many people do, period. So that first half was very much an Arsenal in which I felt like, okay, despite me thinking it was a very risky game plan, which I definitely want to have a section on in general, it was working. And, you know, I found it very ironic because I think, you know, people were very worried about it, but the start showed, and actually Gravenberch made a note about it in his post-match press conference that I'm sure that I have sent to multiple group chats at this point, but talking how they couldn't cope in the first half in terms of what some of the press and the implications of the press in terms of how Liverpool were going to match up against us. They weren't able to get through us in the build-up, and it really actually showed in the first half. We were able to bait them quite well, do a couple moments in which I thought Nani Madueke, who should have seen more of the ball from us, and that was on us. You know, he had the beating of Perkez quite consistently, but once we did draw Liverpool in, in terms of their press, which they were finding difficult to mark. We had to do a better job about hitting the channels early and then being decisive with those early channel runs. But that was the game plan, right? And then things changed in the second half. I think Arne Slot dropped a player in midfield, added an extra body in midfield, which then changed some of the pressing demands because then we were outnumbered in our first line of pressure. And it allowed Liverpool to have an extra man in the pockets where they could move Verts a little bit higher up at the pitch. And, that resulting press change meant that Liverpool had more time in their pass originally, which they didn't have in the first half. And then they had a really good period themselves, I'd say, from the 55th minute to about the 70th, right up to the goal. And then after the goal, gut punch, because that's just a screamer. By the way, David Raya, one of the more agile keepers we've got, who, by the way, guesses right. He knows it's going there and it literally inches. Like, you could not... I think if Dominic Szoboszlai tries to hit that another 5 or 6 times, maybe it goes in another 1 time. Like, that was...
If that, George, you know what I mean?
If that. It was a brilliant hit. Yeah. And take nothing away because the quality is world class in that moment. And he gets their moment. And then from that point on, mate, like, I think that Arsenal were dominant. Yes, we're searching for a goal. But I felt like that was the story of the game for the most part, where, there were moments, and this idea that Arsenal are going to go to Anfield, a place they haven't won in 13 years, and go from minute 1 to 90 and dominate every single minute of the match is utterly ridiculous against a title rival. They're going to have their moments. In their moment, they were able to do it. But as a whole, both teams didn't create much. There was very much a tactical battle of nullifying each other in the moment between the boxes. There was very much a tactical switch, and then there was a response, and then there was Liverpool's turn to do the same thing, and then Arsenal had to respond, and there was a lot of umming and ahhing between these two very good teams that respected the hell out of each other, that ultimately left us without 3 points. So I think you're frustrated in a sense where I didn't feel any team deserved to win, and neither team deserved to lose. And that really was how I felt walking out.
Do you know what it is as well, George? And we kind of mentioned this, and again, another plug to that director's box where we were asked about different things and post-match where it was raw. And I was trying to think of games that I've seen Arsenal play in which the margins have went for us, in a very similar type of matchup. And immediately what came to my head was the Manchester City Arsenal game in 23-24 at the Emirates, the 1-0, the Martinelli goal. Now, in terms of stylistically, that was certainly a little bit more chess matchy, whereas this was slightly more open, just a touch. But I think that's just part and parcel of Anfield and the opponent, because styles are what generate different types of clashes, and you get a little bit more of the boring type of game against Man City, where it is going to be a little bit more open against Liverpool. But what remained prevalent between the two games was that both teams cancel each other out. Man City Arsenal on that day, I can tell you for a fact there was nothing in it barring one sequence that was key in us scoring the goal. And the goal that was deflected off Nathan Ake, and that goes in as well. So a little bit of fortune in that situation. And likewise against Liverpool yesterday, it's a wonder strike from Dominic Szoboszlai that decides the game. And Arne Slot mentioned it post-match if they play that game 8 times, it's 6 draws and maybe 1 win each, and that I think is a very good assessment of the game. And I really struggle with the outrage on the timeline. And like I said, I do understand it, because that's why I wanted to talk about, the reasons why I feel the frustrations are there amongst the fan base, because it's that compounding building effect of what has happened in the past and the fact that we need to win a Premier League title now. But my argument is, mate, I think we said it before, it's match day 3. It's the perfect time to play Liverpool at Anfield, where, from my perspective, if we had won this game, it's a massive statement, don't get me wrong. But if we draw or lose, it is not going to define Arsenal's season. What will define Arsenal's season, I guess we can have a larger section on this perhaps later, is the games in which, not games specifically, but clusters of results that have really hurt us over the years under Mikel, that I believe that is the issue that we need to counter, as opposed to looking at these individual isolated games. And I think for me, in a situation where this is not normal for Arsenal to lose in a big game. Like we've been fantastic in big games.
22 games.
22 games
in 2.5 years.
Yeah, and have we won any league titles yet with that? No. And so the point and the argument that I want to make here is that this is not going to decide us, because we have past evidence of what we have been doing in our title challenges in previous seasons, in which we've done fantastic against the big teams, but we've not been able to get over the line for a number of different reasons. But like I said, it's not going to define Arsenal's season, and I think there's a lot of positives to take, and I'm sure we will eventually get into individual performances as well that, that certainly were really, really encouraging to see.
Okay, so you know what? I wanted to get structure, but let's just get into it, because there is an entire section of the fan base and commentary that called our approach cowardly, and I want to get into it because it's the start of the game. Look, you get the lineup sheet, right, and you get Merino. I had a very different reaction, so I kind of want to set the scene from where I'm saying, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, okay? I had a very different reaction to people that were quoting Mikel Merino. To me, this looked like a kind of a tactic that was born out of Gabriel Heinze. And my reasoning for that is when you have a look at what Heinze really prioritizes in terms of some of his coaching philosophies, he makes really high use of transitions. He makes really high use of having his attackers stay on the last line, giving them a little bit more time in order to dedicate to the attack. He actually doesn't like his attackers to come a little bit deep. And then when I had a look at the front line, we chose all these types of players that like to hang on the last line. It was a collection of Martinelli, Gyökeres, and Noni Madueke, who as a threesome, by the way, are as a group of 3 players who like to hang on the last line. They're these straight line runners, aren't they? There's not one of them that is a ball to feet option that's looking to connect. And so immediately I thought, oh, you're brave. I had the complete opposite reaction to most of the timeline that just looked at Mikel Merino and felt that was conservative. And I thought, and I'm thinking to myself, and I'm thinking, hold on a second. Mikel Merino is not offering any kind of pragmatism. He's not going deep. He's literally a pressing trigger and is going to be an aerial backboard for the runners. That's the idea that I think Mikel is going for. It has nothing to do with having a flat midfield for me. Originally was what my thoughts were. And I'm looking at these 3 and I'm thinking he wants early transitions. He wants us to have the ball and bypass the midfield entirely. Now, we can debate whether that's a good plan or a not a good plan. But the idea that, to me, this was conservative when he's got 3 attackers hanging on the last line and looking for the most vertical plan he could do. Again, mate, I'm very confused because we have, as a fan base, asked for adaptation. We have, as a fan base, asked for us to become more vertical, have less control. None of this game plan was control. It was early bait, quick switch, which is what we saw, by the way, in the first half, dropping it off to Noni Madueke. It was very brave buildup. In fact, sometimes I'd argue David Raya counting his chickens a little bit more. Didn't always get that right, but the game plan was to draw, build in the first phase, and completely ignore our midfield, completely ignore the sides, and quick switch out to our runners who were running on beyond the last line. And I don't think we maybe got the execution correct. But from a game plan perspective, I never once thought this was conservative. If anything, I thought it was risky. I go, dear God, we have turned the dial to 100% vertical in this game plan and are throwing Liverpool, actually, their club, their tactic, their ethos, back at them, which I felt like, okay, I don't know how this is going to go because this is an Arsenal. But I definitely didn't think that it was a pragmatic approach in terms of sitting back. And the more I rewatched it, by the way, the more I felt validated. This was not a pragmatic approach. Pragmatism to me would have been slow build-up, us not looking to go and do the long ball, us not looking to go and do those long switches, and instead trying to play through pressure with a slow, meticulous approach where we're going side to side, working an angle. That, to me, would have been more conservative in terms of a game plan. But here, all I saw was us trying to drop plays over the top off to Noni Madueke. I saw times at least to go to Martinelli, who just had a horrible game. But the ball kept coming back at us, and then we kept using our press to keep Liverpool in their territory. And the irony, mate, when you have a look at all the touch maps...
Well, this is what I was going to say.
Every single counterpart is higher than Liverpool.
Yeah.
So I think people are projecting a lot of their annoyance and their fears because what I saw from Merino and what I saw from the lineup was not what I saw people were thinking Mikel was going to do. So I don't know. Maybe I kind of went on a little bit of a
No,
rant
you're
there,
good. You're good. You cooked.
Just to throw a little bit of a question within there. Does selecting Marino inherently mean a cowardly approach? Or did you feel that the approach that we used, maybe we can debate whether that was a right thing or a wrong thing, but did you think it was conservative? Did you think that we put more men behind the ball, essentially, going to Anfield at the start?
For me, mate, like the way that you can kind of prove that argument is simply by looking at the numbers and the first half in particular, right? The first half was really good from Arsenal. I remember when I messaged the group, I said, this has been a really good half at Anfield. I feel at ease, as much as you can feel at ease at Anfield, really. Like, I don't feel like my goal has been threatened. The only scenario in which I did feel a little bit nervous was when David Raya plays that hospital pass centrally to Zubimendi and sells him short. So I think that, it completely attests to your argument there. For me, mate, and like I said, I've not watched the game back, so I don't want to give concrete opinions on things because I'd like to watch it again specifically. But for me, like, when I look at the lineup and the selection, I think this is more because fans, and I get it, you see Eze on the bench, you see Ethan on the bench, and you're thinking, we should be playing one of these two, in the absence of an Ødegaard who's not fully fit. But I said it on the main pod, I said it on TSP Live, where I felt, I know Mikel, I know what he's like. I didn't feel like he would throw Eze into this game, despite the fact that I understand that he's played at Anfield many times. He's thrived in Anfield scenarios for Palace, but this is a different way of playing at Arsenal, right? And that is something that Eze is going to need time to get used to. It's not to say that he won't start in the next game against Forest. He probably will, but I just felt that the magnitude of the game would have been too much for him to start from the get-go. And I think Ethan, I won't lie, before the game, I felt like I would have gone with an Ethan if an Ødegaard or an Eze is not going to be available from the get-go. But I also understand the reasons why he didn't play Ethan in this game because of, as you alluded to, in terms of Marino as the backboard. So that's where Marino comes into the game. And like I said, I think the numbers attest to the argument that you're making in terms of it not being pragmatic, it being brave, and the territory that we had upfield in the final third, the passes into the final third, the touches in the box, the number of shots, all Arsenal, in Arsenal's favour in that first half. And Liverpool had their period in the second half, as all big teams do at home. It's natural. And I felt, for me, like the fact that Liverpool didn't have like a really big period is a testament to how Arsenal neutralised them. And I think like that needs to be taken into consideration. But like I said, unfortunately, it is outcome driven. The analysis is outcome driven because of what's happened. And then I feel like the analysis has been analysing proceedings, clip that out, analysing proceedings to a preconceived bias. I really do think that is the case here. I'm seeing like open play XG after 3 games. Like, what are we doing here? It's I just can't understand it. And like I said, I don't feel like if there are things to berate Mikel Arteta for, it's certainly not his intentions and his performances against the so-called Big Six, and it's not results-based analysis either. 22 games is a prolonged sample size, so
we are frustrated, and I get it because we haven't done it.
Yeah,
that's what it is. And for me, because we'll definitely go in the second half because I don't think we did things perfect. There was a tactical switch that I felt annoyed with Mikel about and not addressing. Because once Arne Slot did his change in the second half, I thought we should have responded, and we responded late for me. And it was why Liverpool had that period of dominance anyways. And I think that is something I want to critique Mikel on a little bit later. But I want to tie off this like first half and the lineup thing because, you had mentioned about the Ethan and us having people through. So look, football's a very simple game. There's a couple ways in which you can beat an opponent, right? You can go over the top of them. You can kind of go through them, or we can go around them, right? Arsenal go around teams more than anyone in the league. That is the game plan that everybody felt like Arsenal have done too much of, and they're tired of seeing Arsenal attempting to go wide and build through wide chance creation, right? So I think if we had done that, people would have been pissed, right? And then I look for it, and I say, okay, so Martin Odegaard wasn't fit enough to start.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he would have
He would have
started.
started, mate. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, like, of all the things, we had him on the bench, and he's taking painkillers. He's on the red zone. So he would have started if he could. He didn't. That should have said everything. As far as the Eze conversations go, the only thing that I will say that I'm disappointed in Mikel is in the post-match, he had mentioned, look, Eze's only been with us for 4 or 5 sessions, but then later in another question proceeds to then highlight Eze's chance as a reason for not swinging the margins, and had said that when Eze's through, we could win it there, but we don't. I don't think that was great management, personally. He's done that before, and at the end of the day, I get it because he's frustrated with the same intent that I'm saying, where he's like, well, this was a margins game, and at the end of the day, their margins went, and on the day they did it. So respect to them, but it's not some major catastrophic failure on the game plan, on the structure, or on the club. It's just the reality of football. Sometimes those days go for you, and sometimes they don't. In this sense, they went to Liverpool, but I don't agree with then highlighting Eze separately. Like, to me, he's done that with Martinelli. He's done that with other people, and that's where I think it's a bit defensive, because he does take the chance creation points quite personally. The narrative, in my opinion, gets to him when he goes, I've just went 2.5 years of having not been beaten by a top 6 side, and now you're going to throw it at me as something with a stick to beat me with when no one has had that record for 2.5 years. I've been unbeaten in 22 games. How could you say that I don't perform in big games? I don't perform when it counts, when ultimately all of those count. I'm sorry, I'm not taking the argument where people are going to pick and choose particular games in which we failed and not reference the entire 22 game sample, where I'm sorry, every single top 6 club, it doesn't matter at what stage they're in. They are a big club. Manchester United will never want to lose to Arsenal. I don't care how crap they are in the league. They will always step up against an Arsenal. Manchester City will always step up against a Liverpool. Liverpool will always step up against a Man United. Spurs, for God's sakes, how many years have they been behind us and completely insignificant? And why aren't derbies guaranteed wins for Arsenal? I'll tell you why. Because it matters, and pride comes into it. So it's not a foregone conclusion that these top 6 sides were just going to be wins. And if you're going to admit they were, then show me another person who in 2.5 years has even boasted close to the record of Mikel. Not even like, oh, he's won 19 games or 18. The distance, mate, is by over 5 or 6 games. The next competitor. It's quite a significant distance. So I get really annoyed when we lean into that part, because you don't do that by being cowardly. You don't get to get those results for over 2.5 years by riding your luck like that. You can't have your cake and eat it too. So for me, the idea that we were cowardly or whatnot, I really want to kind of put a pin in, because if anything, I'm here to talk about whether or not playing through a team is more successful than playing over them. But don't tell me that we didn't change game plans. Don't tell me that we didn't attempt something incredibly vertical that we recruited these players for. I can't remember the last time Arsenal fielded a front 3 of just straight runners like that, personally. I don't remember a time in which Mikel has done that. Now, do you want to argue? Are you going to do that for an Anfield game? Are you going to try something so drastic? Okay, let's have that conversation. But we have to understand that we did something different. It was working. And at the end of the day, we fell to, ironically, a set piece. The narrative that would have happened if it was us that had won with a set piece, I don't even want to attend. But at the end of the day, sometimes football goes that way, right? And, I think that we have to at least understand the problem, because if we're just going to go and assume a narrative like we're cowardly, we're not able to create chances without the evidence for it, and without at least saying, well, Liverpool were similar. Like, this was a game in which both teams showed a lack of ability to create chances. If we're not going to apply the same logic, then at the end of the day, we're just speaking with emotion. And that, I think, we can't do, especially in a season that's so important for us. We need to make sure that we're early. And I do want to transition to this because I want to get your thoughts, and I think you felt similar. My only thing with Mikel, Eze may have not been fit to start and to understand the system, which I get. He had a hell of a lot more than 20 minutes in him, which is something that I felt. Yeah. And when Arne Slot makes the change to have Jones come in, add a player in midfield, immediately I was like, well, shit, we're going to have an outnumbering in our first line of the press. Mikel, respond. We need to add somebody because Mikel Merino was somebody that was high in the front too, right? Like he wasn't dropping in as much as people want to say it was a flat midfield. It wasn't. He was high and he was working with Gyökeres to pressure out Alisson on the wings. So he wasn't actually in there. I was worried. He dropped Jones in behind Mikel Merino and Gyökeres to add another option. And now Zubimendi would be running back to goal. That's what I was fearing. And I think Mikel did something wrong there. We should have matched up because we went man to man. And then by allowing that to happen, when Liverpool add a player in midfield, Arsenal are unable to match up man-to-man. And you saw it. We got stretched. I think Virgil van Dijk ended up having a brilliant moment himself in which he was incredibly progressive. I'd urge people to have a look back. Like some of the passes that Virgil van Dijk was able to do through our midfield were just, again, world-class quality in terms of the moment. But also, he doesn't get that space and that time on the ball when it's man-to-man. He did because Jones afforded that, and we were outnumbered. And to me, that's when you have to put an Ethan, an Odegaard, an Esse, a midfield body to match Jones up, because now we're outnumbered. And then we're running back to goal. And you could see like the whole Zubimendi pullback is because, of course, he's felt like a little bit on an island. Yeah. Our distances in midfield became far too big. And that's when Liverpool opened up. That's when the cop exploded. That's when I think we did wrong. So I think we were 10 minutes, 15 minutes late with a sub. And I don't know how you felt.
I felt the same, mate.
And that was why I think we just didn't match up in the first line of pressure.
Yeah, I mean, like, for me, like, you know, as I alluded to, every single team, big team that is at home, they are going to have their period of dominance in which you feel the game is starting to swing. And I said it at home to my brothers, like, this game is swinging now. The momentum is changing. Yeah. I don't feel as comfortable. We need a response. I'd say it was around the 60th minute to the 75th minute. And ironically, you know, when they scored the goal, I didn't think they had like a really like dominant spell between like the 75th to like the 83rd minute. But there was that period of the game where I felt this is getting a little bit edgy now. And I'm seeing Calafiori in a lot more isolated 1v1s, which, you know, we weren't seeing. He did fantastically, by the way, in that regard. But we weren't seeing that in the first half. We weren't seeing players in serious 1v1 battles, especially along our last line where Timber as well against Gakpo and then the overlaps with Kirkheads. You know, that wasn't something I saw a lot in the first half. And I felt, okay, we're doing well to actually handle this. But, you know, it just doesn't feel as safe and secure as I would have wanted it. And I do think, as you mentioned, the subs could have been a little bit earlier. And for me, this, mate, is one of the litmus tests for Mikel in terms of managing the squad and being proactive when the game slightly alters, you know, during a contest. And I think the argument that Mikel would perhaps make to counter that is, well, even though Liverpool and the game was starting to shift and they made the tweak, as you alluded to, it still wasn't like loads of threat. David Raya's goal under siege, etc. The game is still kind of evenly poised. He could make that argument, and then he could also make the argument of, well, again, like we've mentioned, the goal comes out of a free kick that is an absolute worldie, you know. So, but it's one of those things when you do concede a goal and you do then look at that period in which Liverpool did have before the goal, you know, you then start to ask the questions of, well, maybe if you'd made this change, you brought this body on who gives you different characteristics, as we saw of Eze, what he was capable of on the wide areas, and something could have changed. And that's certainly that for me, mate. And like I said, I'll need to watch it back. I would say is my only real frustration from the contest. You know, I didn't have the frustrations of the line. Like I said, it wouldn't have been my lineup, but I understood why he went that way. You know, and as we mentioned, the first half does speak for itself. But I would certainly say the lack of proactivity, the subs, was probably my only critique of Mikel in this game. Yeah,
and it's weird because it was the subs I wanted. It was late.
It was just a little bit too late, wasn't it? That's all. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think moving on, I want to get into like individual performances because there was a couple. I want to do like a positive, and then we'll end on somebody that maybe needs improvement for each of us. So I think the first one I wanted to bring up was Calafiori, mate. Like I saw you had made a post on X, so I think there's might be meat to that bone. Mate, one of his better defensive performances. Especially in wide situations. I mean, to clamp down Salah, okay, that was the exact type of player he was struggling with massively in terms of when he first arrived. The type of player, right? Like Savinho, he had a really difficult time against Man City. It's the same type of thing. And I thought, for me, I always made a point. I don't think with Calafiori it's anything to do with his understanding, tackling. It's about judging the distances to meet the player out wide. He was a little late, and he's just learning. It's a different league. He has to understand how much distance these attackers can make. And I'm sorry, like Serie A attackers aren't like the Premier League attackers. And so the timing, it was just off. But for me, when Calafiori was in the box, forced into defensive situations, I was calm. It was just meeting players out wide. Walk me through your interpretation of this performance and how important you think it might be with Hincapié coming in order for Calafiori to show this type of performance, a lockdown performance against one of the league's best right wingers. How do you feel that goes for him, the squad, and even our fans who may have said brilliant player, but can be vulnerable defensively?
Yeah. For me, mate, like when we look at Calafiori, and we've eulogized over him many times, we've showered him with immense praise because we believe in the talent and the quality. The quality just screams at you. You don't need to be able to analyze a game to recognize that Calafiori is just a serious player. But when we look at his performances, his best performances, it's a lot of emphasis on the ball. On the ball, what he's able to do in terms of how two-way he is. He can open both sides up. How many times is he able to switch it to the right-hand side and isolate Saka? He's done that many times, with his right foot. He's fantastic in that regard. But the reason why this really impressed me is because Calafiori's eye-catching moments were the defensive scenarios that he was put in, how he thrived against Salah, and that is something that we need to put a lot of emphasis on, because I think a lot of people, it was food for thought. Do you go with the Calafiori at left back, who is a lot more expansive in an attacking sense to a Miles in terms of how two-way he is, in terms of the spaces that he can occupy, what he can offer on the outside, etc., all those things, but are we comfortable with Calafiori in the Salah battle, whereas Miles may not be able to give what Calafiori gives in an attacking sense, but we've got a sample of Miles in terms of his ability to deal with players 1v1 in isolation. And we saw it against Salah last season with Miles at Anfield. He was fantastic, But I wanted to go with Calafiori because I do feel like, as you've alluded to, I do think the 1v1 capabilities are a little bit overstated. He's had a couple of moments which he's been burned, like the Savinho one. It's not from a scenario in which he's fixed 1v1 and Savinho is standing him up. He doesn't judge the distance correctly. As you mentioned, he goes in too early. Savinho recognises that and he's able to pull away from him quickly, and then he's beaten him there. So I think with Calafiori is that it's certainly changed how Arsenal fans feel about him in terms of that off-the-ball quality he can give out wide. Because for me, I've always thought Calafiori, his best position, his long-term position is left centre-back. And his ability to defend the wide channels, starting from central, coming out wide, is fantastic. It's a case of, I think, the worry that people had is when he's fixed 1v1. And because he's been burned a few times, there's that worry. But he was fantastic in that regard. And I think all we need for this guy to do is stay fit. Because he's fantastic. He's had his top start to the season as well. That's 3 games in a row, 3 fantastic performances.
Can I ask you, because as we're recording, we've announced Piero Hincapié officially. He's officially a gunner, but I did want to throw that into the consideration, let's call it, because mate, I have a feeling that Arsenal have really drastically changed their squad consideration, and we've actually gone back to a lot of the ESR Tierney 2021 philosophies here. In our 3 games, just period. There's a lot more of a conceded double pivot. There's a lot more consideration towards an overlapping fullback with more of a 10 on the inside towards the left-hand side. And I mean, I think the one thing I will say is I hope that Calafiori and the idea that we had to rely on his fitness was a major if. And in order to secure Hincapié, do you think it's more to supplement Calafiori? Is it genuine competition? Do you view the Calafiori-Hincapié duo as probably they're similar profiles? So I wouldn't quite call them the same profile. It's very weird. I think our left back situation, it's not a Ben White Timber where they're just so brilliant,
but they're different.
So different.
Yeah.
Yes. They're quite different. Hincapié has many things that do overlap with Calafiori, but to me, Calafiori is not a true overlapper. He can do it in moments, and he's probably the best player to do it on the outside. But really, when he does stretch his legs, it's on the inside. He's much more of an underlapper. He's much more someone that likes to get involved in midfield and burst through the center of a pitch as opposed to the outside. Hincapié does a little bit more of the outside. Do you now see that Miles and his minutes and the whole Calafiori minutes, how do you see those three sharing the left back? And is there more of a move towards Miles in midfield and having these two players, Calafiori and Hincapié, be your main left back options? Because we've also kept Zinchenko. He also hasn't moved, so he is part of the group. So where do you see the minute share happening between all four of those, let's call it?
I do feel like this is a big signal to a Miles eventually moving into midfield and him getting more minutes in that position. You know, I think for me, like, the other factor that we need to consider is the Gabriel injury that he sustained last season, you know, being out for 3 months with a hamstring injury. And I think, like, just being able to manage that left-hand side a lot better, I think Hincapié allows you to do that. Because Kiwior, whatever we think about Kiwior and what he was able to do in terms of giving Arsenal stability at a time they absolutely needed it last season, you know, this is someone who has always been available since he's came to the club. It's been one of his big traits, you know, in terms of always being able to come in, and it's never been perfect from Kiwior, but he's been able to give us continuity in key moments both last season and the season before, and we needed to replace that. And I think bringing Hincapié not only signals, well, it further, you know, kind of like exemplifies the fact that we are looking to change the left-hand side. We've already started to see the change. You know, it makes you really feel like, okay, we've got Calafiori now, we've got Hincapié. I've not seen a lot of Hincapié, but from what the games that I have seen, like, briefly in the past and some of the comps, this is someone who does thrive on the outside. You know, that is something that is a clear way of showing you that Arsenal are going through change, and I really like that. And I really like the idea that we have not banked on Calafiori's durability. As much as I love the player, we need someone who is going to be able to come in and allow us to replicate similar dynamics, and that's what it's about with Hincapié. And you know, like, I guess we could go to you know, another positive from yesterday in terms of players and Mosquera, right? Now, I don't know what you, George, but I've seen, again, you know, you see the discourse of Arsenal signing defenders and defenders and defenders. If we didn't have Mosquera yesterday, who would we have played? Who would we have played with Saliba going down?
I genuinely don't know.
It would have probably been maybe a Declan Rice at right back, or, you know, something like that we would have done. You know, so this is why, and I said it in TCB Live, this is why the signing of Hincapié, the signing of Mosquera makes so much sense, given the fact that, I said, the Premier League is becoming a lot more competitive. You've seen what's happened with Manchester City, 2 games on the bounce they've lost against Brighton and Spurs. You're seeing, like, Leeds, for example. Leeds look decent. They played Newcastle, they look decent. Sure. You know, they looked decent against Arsenal as well before we scored the opening goal. It's becoming a lot more competitive. The league is becoming a lot more homogenous in terms of tactically. And what that means is it becomes a lot more intense. It's becoming a lot more physical, a lot more running required. You need a lot of players now. And I've changed my mindset on how I see things in terms of the squads, where before you're kind of always worried, like, oh, you know, we've got too many players. We're thinking, how's he going to get minutes? How's he going to get minutes? You're going to get minutes. And we saw it with Mosquera yesterday where, mate, it was a baptism of fire. That is as hard as it can really get for you on your debut. 2 minutes in, you see Saliba go down. He comes in, and I remember when we did a pod about it, where we all gave our opinions, and then, as you know, I did my research and I did my revision on Mosquera. I said about him is, like, he's got things that he needs to work on. And I think we actually saw it in the game as well, where some of his passes, they were under hit and over hit to teammates, in which it did put certain individuals under pressure. But what you can't take away from Mosquera is he is so brave. He will keep playing it forward. And as you saw it, there were times, again, under pressure, he takes it onto his left-hand side. This is his trademark because he's played so much at left centre-back. Takes it onto his left and plays it forward, breaks the line. And I think it was Marino in this situation where he finds it and then we're away. That is the type of player he is. And he was fantastic in the duels as well against Ekitike. Completely locked him down. There's not a lot of conversation about that from the game.
No.
So, fantastic, mate. Honestly, for that to be your, like, you know, first big impact first, because the other games that he had against Leeds, he came on for the last 20 or so minutes. This was a big moment for him, replacing someone like Saliba. And we've got a gem here. We've been saying it. You're going to love this kid because of his raw physical attributes and the things he can do in terms of his bravery of being able to play it through the lines. So yeah.
I loved his performance, mate.
Yeah.
Like, to me, look, I have a bias. I'm going to hold my hands up. I love this type of defender.
Yeah.
To me, somebody who just wins their duels is a physical freak who
Yeah.
has really good intent. Every pass is punchy
Yeah.
with Mascara. You had mentioned like the overhit, but the thing that I think is, like you said, the early timing. It's
Yeah.
always 1-2 seconds, bang. He never holds on to it. There was a moment where I think he did a run and he kind of overhits, but he's breaking the lines, and I'm like, "Oh, you're brave."
Yeah.
Coming in brand new to do this. And by the way, I was seeing a lot personally on look back. Have a look at David Raya coaching him a lot. And it's a lot on him and his personality to actually express himself that way. But David Raya was coaching him so much in terms of some of the positioning, as he should. Like, this is really a baptism under fire. And I felt that he did brilliantly. And to do this, I was always very high on him, mate. Like, I genuinely think he's going to push. We're going to have some really uncomfortable conversations, in my opinion, because when you perform like that and you do that so early on and you're so confident in your abilities, like, I think that he can do a Timber role easily, or a Ben White role
100%,
easily.
100%.
So like, you're looking at the minutes. It's not even just Saliba for me, but even, with Ben White, like, if he continues to have some of these surgeries, like, mate, like, he becomes vital. Like, if Ben's not fit and he isn't going to prove his fitness this season, that's now 2 seasons on the bench in which we're doing this, and it was a vital move. And I think Hikapié, even just to round this off, because that meme where there's that horse with like fire and there's like sections of it?
Yeah.
We very much got great behind. Our middle has actually become great. I'm going to sit there and do that, because if Miles is moving into midfield, we've added midfield depth there that we didn't have last year. And I would argue between Norgard, Zubamendi, Rice, Miles, Lewis, Skelly as your 4 sitters, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Depth right there. Phenomenal. Then you're looking up top, and mate, you're looking at Odegaard, Eze, Ethan, Max. That's crazy level of depth for the interiors. And of course, Vieira has gone out on a loan, for this season. But that's incredible depth in terms of the midfield. Like, I'm looking, it's got every single type of profile there. Look, I admit, I think our attack needs work. I don't think it's the same. But I don't think it's the same in our squad, right? Like, I do think, if people are being honest, there is upgrades there. I wouldn't call it the flaming horse head quite yet. It is definitely something that we could maybe add something there.
Yeah.
But it is a case of like upgrading as opposed to lacking a hole necessarily.
100%.
And so,
yeah.
So I think that's where I would say, and even people that are saying, because I do want to get to this and I don't want to avoid this conversation, because I think we'll end on a needs improvement, and it is Gabriel Martinelli. I struggle with this quite a bit. The one thing I believe is we have bought the conditions where you can no longer say environment is what is holding back the connections on our left wing. The first thing that Eze comes and does in his debut, walks on, finds an early pass into Martin Odegaard in zone 14, who has a beautiful reverse ball to Gyökeres, who really should have been more alive.
On his toes, mate. He should have been on his toes.
And that was a but you know what? It was the intent from Eze, mate. Like, Liverpool were shocked. It was one pass, bang. And that entry pass into zone 14 when you're already in the final third is something this team doesn't do enough of. The early balls into that. And that's how you open up central access a little bit. It's not just on dynamic overlaps. It's not just on, it's the willingness to cut inside, find your man early for quick combinations. And, it wasn't even just that play. Like, that play when Eze carries into the box and he gets fouled, which, by the way, I think it wasn't a penalty for personally. Like, I don't think it was a foul like that. But that bores out of, again, Eze coming inside, looking to combine, receive a nice little give and go and carry it into the box. And I just think, mate, like, just in general, with the Gabriel Martinelli conversation, you cannot say that we haven't provided him the tools to thrive. At this point, I think he's gotten into his head, truly. And the best thing that can happen for his sake is some time off. And then to come back in and play on instinct again. Because I think one of the biggest frustrations I have is people are fed up with the talent, and I understand. But to me, Gabriel Martinelli was never great for his conservative play and his pausa. That was not the Gabriel Martinelli that came into this team and that Klopp called a talent of the century. Why he called it a talent of the century was based on box instincts. movement in the box, finishing, the ability to carry through the middle of the pitch, those things. And he's just not doing them. He has got to the point where he's been so conditioned to be conservative. He's forgot what it's like to be inventive. And, with Mikel, who's talking about providing that freedom to Eze and providing that freedom, it's on us to coach that back. I don't believe that this player that we saw is completely useless. I'm seeing comments that he's useless. It's not just that it's bad, but it's useless. And I'm thinking to myself, how can that movement be useless? Yeah. How can that movement be, not part of the squad, in a squad that lacks some of that running power and that we've added now to replace it? And at the same time, I'm saying, well, let me be honest here. That performance was very poor. There was a ton of individual decision-making where I think I almost broke my wrist with Gabriel Martinelli running, the exact play I'm talking about. Gyökeres is on the inside and he doesn't freaking release it. And I have to be consistent. I've killed Martin Odegaard for that. And I kill Gabriel Martinelli for not doing that.
Yeah, you got to. Yeah, you have to, innit?
But I'm thinking to myself, what's there to say in a performance where I think he's had a history of performing really well against this type of opponent? And at the end of the day, I'd say if things don't work out, I am more in the camp of individual responsibility this season.
Absolutely.
Because of the moves that we've done. Whereas before I felt that was more in doubt. And that's kind of where I stand, because I look at yesterday and I say, that's on you.
Yeah.
Martinelli, mate. I think this was a game plan that suited you.
Yeah.
And we played, I think you didn't have the combinations, I'll be honest, but neither did Nani Madueke, and he performed brilliantly against Kirkes and did a lot more with his share of the ball. And I'm just thinking to myself, yesterday you just didn't help yourself. That was a really poor individual performance. I don't know how much you got to go into it, but I wanted to know your thoughts on how we solved that player. Is that player a sale? Is that player... Am I wrong? I need to understand some of my reflection. Is this a weed? Is this a player?
It's not a weed.
It's not enough sunlight. Where are we putting this category? Because people are talking about him as a weed.
Yeah.
At this point. And I'm thinking to myself, no way he's that. It's been really poor. And I think yesterday was one of his worst performances, period. Genuinely, really indecisive, really unconvincing, and typified actually, people have said this about him in that position, right? That he isn't somebody that goes on the outside and is predictable. There was an article from The Athletic that other coaches had highlighted that position. It was highlighted again with Gravenberch in that interview, and he did talk about going more man-to-man. They trusted Konate to deal with that side 1v1. That can't continue. I would argue, mate, though, that we've got conditions that he shouldn't be doing that role.
Yeah, I think for
so. I don't know where you stand on the performance yesterday, building that up, and whether we can reinvest in the squad. And do we do Hincapié, or is this genuinely somebody that we may need to move on completely?
I think for me, it's this season, isn't it? This season is Gabriel Martinelli's season to showcase that it was the environment that was not allowing him to flourish previously. Because I've came on here as well many a time in which, I've always sat in between where there clearly is an environment issue here, because it's not just Martinelli, it's also Trossard who has struggled on the left-hand side. Yes, Trossard has given us productivity, but when we're looking at overall performances of players on that left-hand side, nobody has been able to stamp their authority consistently and make it their own. So then when I see multiple players, not being able to perform to the consistency that I want and what Arsenal fans want, I have to sit there and think, well, the left-hand side, I would say post-Xhaka, has improved incredibly out of possession. I've always been someone who has been kind of in the middle, where is it an environment issue, is it a player issue? And I think it's a combination of both in terms of individuals need to take responsibility, but at the same time, I don't think that left-hand side has been enhanced in a way that has allowed whoever plays there to flourish, because when I look at Leandro Trossard as well, who has been productive, I do feel like in terms of his overall performance levels, they haven't been consistent, and neither has Gabriel Martinelli's. So then I've got two players there who have not been able to give us, Arsenal fans, the desired level of consistency. So there is something there from an environment perspective. And I would say post 22-23, when I talk about the absence of Jack, and when I talk about the absence of a Jesus, of what he was able to do in the first 19 games in particular, I feel that Arsenal have improved out of possession-wise with the inclusion of Declan Rice and Kai Havertz, but our in-possession quality has diminished, to the level that I think has been too poor, and it's become to the level in which teams are effectively going a lot more man-man to our right-hand side and allowing a little bit more space for Arsenal through the left. That's a clear indication of a team saying, we don't rate you as much through your left-hand side to your right-hand side. Show us what you can do for the left, and we've not been able to see that enough. But now, and just to go back on that, I also do think that there's the level of individual responsibility in which Gabriel Martinelli has given us really frustrating decision-making in key moments. I think that is a really fair argument. But this season, mate, as you've alluded to, we have got the players to unlock that side. We have already been seeing change through the left-hand side that is making it look better, in pre-season, in the latter games. And also, I'd say against Leeds, there were things that we did that I did really like.
I agree.
So now, we've creating a better environment. So it leaves yourself. And what will compound it even more is if Eze comes in and he bangs, then it becomes an even poorer look at a Martinelli, where if he then starts coming on and having cameos and he's not able to perform, then it makes it a lot more difficult for people to really kind of, have that defence for him, But I do think this is still a very good time. I do think this is a player who has been misprofiled by Mikel in terms of how he's used him through the left-hand side, where I do think that, like you've alluded to, the box instincts, like Gabriel Martinelli, some of his best moments, in an Arsenal shirt come from really instinctive moments in the box. I remember Nottingham Forest goal that he scored in 22-23.
Liverpool, mate.
Liverpool, under Unai Emery as well in some of those cup games. Like, these are instinctive finishes, fantastic header of the ball as well in box scenarios as well. So, but the reality is that like we've already mentioned, the environment is there's clear intention from Mikel alongside the signing of a Gyökeres. We're changing things, so now it's on the individuals to show that it was the environment, because if his performances aren't good, then you've not really got a leg to stand on, and so.
Yeah, and I don't want to kill a player because I think he had a bad day.
Yeah, exactly. We have to give him the season, I think, from the
you want to give him the season, and I think we'll see it. And look, the one thing I'll end on as a positive, because we'll wrap this up and then we'll take questions. I think Andrea Berta, I haven't agreed with every single transfer. Have to be upfront and honest. But as a squad, and in terms of squad holes, I think Andrea Berta has given Mikel the best squad in the league. Squad. Now, whether or not we're able to compete in terms of some of the quality is very different, because I think that, Liverpool, for example, have a much better attack than Arsenal's, especially with Alexander Isak going there, which that burns me. I'll be honest. I think the narrative in terms of that, I struggle with personally. I thought, okay, if you've got Florian Wirtz and we got Eze, I could deal with it, right? Like, I think those are of similar quality. And then that depends on the player, right? Like, and the coach and which one you might prefer. But we got our Eze. I don't think that's as much of a downgrade. I do think that Alexander Isak, in comparison to a Madueke and a Gyökeres, are very different ideas. It's more about floor raising in those direct comparisons than it is about a direct quality comparison between the two, because the argument isn't that any one of Gyökeres or Madueke is of equal quality to Isak. It's that the collective decision of having two there could give us the same output than an Isak alone could have given us, right? Like, that's the logic in weighing. I have to be honest, I'm not a fan of that. But regardless of my personal feelings, Andrea Berta has given Mikel Arteta a squad in which you could say there are no holes. There are potential upgrades that we could do. There are certain players that maybe we can have better wage allocation with. But from a squad perspective, I've never known an Arsenal team, and I'm so proud to say this, have gone into a season without a bloody hole, mate. There isn't one more.
Yeah,
there isn't.
Yeah, I agree. I think
we have done it.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know, like, what do you make? We'll talk about the sales, and I don't want to make this a whole segment, but just how do you feel with the squad approaching the season? We're now international break. It's done. Hincapie's in. It's a season-long loan with an obligation. He is our player. He will be our player. Do you look at this team and say, look, despite us losing against Liverpool, like this squad is incredible. incredibly talented, and it's been spent on, and it has all of Mikel's needs. I don't look at it, for example, and have a holding fear or have a fear that there is a point of failure, And last year, I don't know if I agree. Like I had it, like there were injuries and I was like, okay, well, if Saliba gets injured, I don't know who's going to go in. There is a genuine concern to me, but I walk in now feeling like, okay, I may not agree with all the decisions, but Gyökeres is not a shit player. He's there with Havertz. If Havertz doesn't play, I now got a striker who I think should be able to produce enough football that we have a quality performance. I look at Calafiori, he's injured. Hincapié is absolutely of the quality. Again, Saliba's injured. Mascara is of the quality.
We had
I just named 3 or 4 positions where they weren't the case last year.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is the case this Saka, for God's sakes, Nani Madueke I thought did phenomenal against Kirkes. I'm not worried. I like Saka. I would obviously not want Saka to be out for months.
This is it,
but I'm not worried. And Berta has given us that. So what do you feel approaching the squad and your confidence levels after the window?
I've always said that. Yeah, so for me, mate, I've always said that you can have your individual preferences on certain players that you felt Arsenal should have gone for, as opposed to the individuals that we did get over the line. But I don't think you can criticise what we have done in terms of the volume of work and ensuring that we have insurance policies in different positions that could have really hurt us, did hurt us last season, right? So, like if Saka goes down injured for the whole season, right, that is really unfortunate, yeah, and you can't really mitigate that. But what you can do is if Saka is out for a month or 2 months, you ensure that you can maintain specific dynamics and have a player who can come in that allows you to not have to make a lot of change. That's what Madueke does. We had the best example just recently with William Saliba going down, and we've got Mosquera coming in and giving us a fantastic impact. Right? And for me, like I just look at the business that Berta has done, and it's just a different voice and a different head, mate. It's a different way of operating that Arsenal have not had.
Ruthless.
It's ruthless. And this is where, when we looked at Berta and what we wanted in our sporting director, I said it needs to be experience. It needs to be someone who's been in the game, he's been through peaks, he's been through troughs, and he's bringing that experience to a club under its current hierarchy and schematic where we look at the individuals that are there. Mikel is still someone who's learning his trade. He's not been in management for a very long time. He needs someone there who has been in the game and he's done it. And that's what Berta has done. And I think he's had a fantastic window in terms of ensuring that we can really look at Mikel in terms of specific managerial decisions that he makes with the squad in game, as we've already done against Liverpool, in terms of not being proactive enough, and we can criticise him more fairly now because he's got the resources, he's got the tools to try and manage this squad a lot better. It's going to be interesting with the Champions League games coming in as well, with the Bayern Munich tie that's sandwiched in between Spurs and Chelsea. It's unfortunate, but this is why you have a squad. And all the best teams, when you go to the latter stages of tournaments in the Champions League and the FA Cup, you have to be able to navigate through different games and being able to ensure that you don't have a really big drop-off. That's, for me, a big litmus test for Mikel.
So it is, it's brilliant, mate. I think when I have a look at the squad now, it is truly complete.
Yeah.
And with Berta, I actually change what I think is possible with Arsenal.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was a very optimistic fan with the transfer window. Yeah. And my demands were a little bit harsher, in my opinion, than I think you and Alex, if that's fair to say. Yeah. I was very much saying the left-sided defender was a necessary thing for me. I think you guys were like, no, if we can do it, great. You both wanted it. But it was I don't know if it's necessary. That's a lot to ask. Berta did it. I'm and more. He gave me 3 attackers. You know me. I was I wanted it. Yeah. But I didn't think 3 attackers and a left back. I was it was one of the 2. And I felt both were very important. Yeah. But he did it all. He gave me my entire Christmas gift. He did everything. Yeah. So I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, holy crap. In the future, when I think about holes, I'm going to give the demand because I sat there and he did it. And he did, for me, what seemed impossible in terms of being able to get a squad that had no holes. And I have a feeling, mate, I have some definite thoughts. I look at Ben White, a player I love. You know how much I love Ben White. I worry about his position being tenable in the next year if he's unable to prove his fitness. I know there's a Berta there that looks at that and goes, you can love him, Mikel, but he hasn't been fit for 2 years. Get him out and get somebody in that is fit. And I think that you could be approaching that situation with many players. Like, look, Martinelli, you haven't performed for 2 years. Out and get in somebody that is better performing.
Yeah.
You know, Jesus, it's been a case of Mikel. You might like Jesus, but he hasn't come and contributed. He's out. And that's brilliant. Like, I think having another mind just to question the ideas going forward is what we ultimately wanted. And I think it's proven successful. Whether or not people agree, like, I have a look at it and we'll probably have to talk about this another day. Who is a Mikel signing and who is a Berta signing? That'll be the wars. But ultimately, I think it was a team that was successful. And I think I will give my opinion right now. As it stands, I think our sales have been a little bit low. So I'm more in the 9 out of 10 camp for this window personally.
100%, yeah.
And, you know, if we get Saka Saliba extensions, that's a 9.5 kind of thing to me. And the only thing is, I have to be honest, I don't know about the attack quite yet. The attack for me is a collective quality. I love that we did 3. I just don't know about the quality quite yet. But yeah, that's why for me it's a minimum 9 out of 10. I don't think you can get lower than that. And I think people are being really rude, to be honest, if you're lower than a 9 out of 10 window with Nkapie in.
100%. 9 out of 10 minimum. Minimum 9 out of 10. I'd say 9.5 as well with the extensions to Saliba and Saka. And I wouldn't give it 10 because you can never be perfect. And
there we go.
And again, like some of the players that we did get, they weren't my number one choice. But like I said, we have to look at the intent and the approach and filling in the gaps, and we've done that. And I'm glad that next summer we're going to be in a situation where, you know, we have to sell this player to buy another player because the squad is now in a position in which there aren't holes, you know, and I've always wanted that.
Which is right.
Yeah.
I must say now.
Yeah.
Before I wasn't with people. Yeah. Now I'm with you. Like, yeah, no, it makes sense. We've got too many players right now. I don't think that you should have them in if you're not having a successful plan to sell. Yeah. Okay, let's move to questions. Thank you guys so much, by the way, for all the questions. You guys are always brilliant in terms of giving us more questions than we can ever continue with. However, I'll go on X, and then maybe in the meantime, you can pick out some Discord stuff. Yeah. But I do have some stuff with X, and I think we've answered some of the stuff here because I was a little bit controversial in my post today in terms of us being cowardly or not. But here's a question from Thabs at Thabs_. Does the opinion of the match completely change if it was a Declan Rice free kick that went into the Liverpool net? If so, should the analysis be so black and white if the margin is literally a worldie of a free kick? And did Mikel get it wrong because we lost? Or should we have encouraged a transitional match with the players he had unavailable? Would it have felt better to lose 4-2 because it was just giving it a go? There's a lot of questions here, so I will be very specific.
Yeah.
I think the last part, because we kind of touched on the free kick aspect. Yeah, so I think mainly, though, do you think it would have been better to lose 4-2 having given it a go? Like, let's say you threw in Eze, and, you know, we're sliced through because he doesn't understand some of the pressing triggers. But we gave it a go, and it was 4-2. Do you think fans would have given it, or is this all hindsight kind of analysis?
Hindsight, mate. I'm telling you, if we lost 4-2, fans are not going to be happy. Yeah. They're not going to be happy. I genuinely do think that a lot of the frustration, I've said it twice now, is that it's because of everything that has been building, in which every game feels do or die. If we don't win this game, it's a big setback. You know, the league is becoming further away. Liverpool are now extending their lead, etc. I really do think that is going to be the case a lot of the time. I can guarantee you that we could play a fantastic game. Let's say we play a fantastic game against, I don't know, Man City, and we get done by, you know, a bit of luck. We lose that game, let's say, you know, and we create loads of chances. We have like a David De Gea, you know, the David De Gea game in which we pop in the goal, but we lose. The narrative will be the same in terms of the outcome. I really do think that, you know, and that's where I stand on it. And I think it's just this really like big frustration that is boiling and that is being expressed every time we do get a setback. And that's the way I see it.
Yeah, no, I kind of do agree. I mean, there's another question from at Big Boy Thug, and what do you think of our football philosophy under Arteta? Does it inspire to win, or is it too dull? The only reason that I kind of say some of that is that boils down into some of the chance creation that I hope we addressed a little bit earlier on. But I think more of this inspiring to win because I saw Gary Neville do it on commentary. I saw Jamie Carragher do it in terms of setting people not to lose, Schmeichel, the whole circuit. It's ironically, people love quoting the United circuit who hate us, and all the boys that hate us. But anyways, you talk about Schmeichel, Neville, and whatever. But I mean, I don't want to dismiss it and poo-poo it and be really arrogant. Do you ever feel like we are maybe too in the philosophy of not to lose, and we don't gamble enough in moments that we could gamble? Because the one thing that I'll say is, like, regardless whether or not you gamble or you do, we've kind of left in the same outcome where I thought Arsene Wenger was an eternal gambler and we didn't win stuff when we did gamble. We played an attractive style of football. I think people forget. Yes, at times people complained about the U shape, but undoubtedly there were times in which he would put on attacking midfielders on the wings. His style was to gamble, and we got cut through. We got obliterated. We got destroyed by the Big Six on a frequent basis. We got absolutely embarrassed.
Minimum 3 goals shipped every single time. Yeah.
Mate, but it was brave. Yeah. We gave it a go. And I think people forget some of that time. And I'm personally of the opinion it's completely trophy-based analysis, where it was like, it doesn't matter. But I do want to ask the genuine question, is there a responsibility to be more progressive given we are Arsenal Football Club, given who we support, what Arsene Wenger stood for, and what this club stands for? Like, Liverpool are a club that ride on emotion. They ride on transition, quick transitions. I think United built their entire club philosophy on true 4-4-2 wing play with striking partnerships and really being able to stretch teams, but use them in a way in which sometimes they use their heart and mentality to win as opposed to necessarily playing good or pretty football. Arsenal, we made our club on playing pretty football and won brilliantly with it. But we prided ourselves. I don't want to be like snobbish. We were, as fans, we play prettier football than you. We do it the right. We did do that. Yep. I have to hand on heart say that's one of the reasons that I supported Arsenal. I love the way we played. Is there a responsibility for Mikel to do a bit more in terms of the style of play? Or is his responsibility to win? Like, where do you stand on, I guess, that demand?
Nate, I think in the big games away from home at Anfield, I completely understand a bit more of a pragmatic mindset if we're going to go down that route, in terms of what I prefer. The games at home where you play against Liverpool and Man City, I completely hear the argument of in terms of being more progressive, if we're going then into that conversation. And we do, mate. Like when we played Liverpool at the Emirates last season, we did play a progressive way. And against Manchester City, we did the same. The season against the 23-24 season as well, when we beat Liverpool 3-1. Again, a progressive way of playing. We dominated that game. So I don't agree that Mikel doesn't do it in the big games. I do think that he can be a little bit more circumspect in the big games away from home. And damn right. I think you do need to respect these teams when you're going to their yard. And as we've already mentioned in this pod, as you've mentioned in terms of the first half, that wasn't a team that was cautious. That was a team that was, very much on top, out of the two sides, in terms of touches in the box, shots, territory. So I just can't see it. I remember the grass is not greener on the other side. I remember those games under Arsene. Arsene is still my favourite ever manager. Like, I love that guy. There's not a manager in Premier League history who's able to open up a low block in the way that Arsene Wenger teams are capable of doing. No. But in the big games, once we started to transition away from the physical brutes in midfield to a more technical side, we'd get outrun and we'd concede 3 goals minimum in the big games. I remember them very vividly. I don't want Arsenal to go back there. You could argue maybe we could shift the dial a little bit, but I think a lot of this is all hindsight, and it's all because of the outcome that has ultimately been a wonder free kick. Let's remember that. It's a wonder free kick from 40 yards out.
I completely agree. And mate, I share, people don't know, maybe they do, Arsene Wenger, if there was a person I followed in football, it was him. I just
love him.
I love him. And I'm deluded. I'm admittedly deluded, and I will not hear criticism against that man. I love him, and I've always said it's gone further. Not only did he play in the right way, mate, but it was a level of directness and combination play that even for me, Barcelona and Ajax couldn't replicate to the same degree. When an Arsene Wenger team was in full flow, that back to front, the Norwich goal with Jack, like the 1-2 touch thing, I have admittedly, and I'll just speak for myself, bragged to other people and said, you could never hope to even dream of producing a goal. I don't care who it was against. Your teams couldn't, and look at the players he did that with. You couldn't have even facilitated that. And so there is a responsibility from my perspective for Arsenal to represent good football because it is a part of our fabric. The thing is, I'm with you. I don't think people remember those times, or certainly they forget about how easily we were beaten. And teams didn't respect us. Chelsea didn't respect us. Liverpool, Man United didn't respect us. Like, we approach those games thinking, I don't want to go to school with a major score line. I'll be honest. I mean, your 8-2s and those score lines, they weren't pretty. They weren't
6-0s, 5-1s, 6-3s, mate, 4-0s. Oh my God.
Like, it hurts. But then I'm like, I don't want to poo-poo people who obviously have an affinity and they've drawn in terms of falling in love with the club for that. I think where I stand ultimately is none of this stuff matters until we find somebody that's able to get us over the line.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I think the conversation changes so much when something like that.
It does. And it's a case of, by the way, everybody, like even Pep, philosophy talk has taken a big thing the last week. I mean, Pep makes the whole 1,000 passes comments in his press conference. It's getting to him, like all my titles and the philosophies and whatnot. At the end of the day, to try to tie up this pod in terms of my feelings, I'm gutted to have lost against a title rival, as I'm always gutted to lose. I'm proud of the way that we competed. I didn't feel, for once, because there's been many a big game that I felt that we've left goals on the table. I don't think we left goals on the table. It was just a very hard-fought game that was separated by a moment of magic. I feel as a gut punch because I just felt like none of the teams deserved to win and none of them deserved to lose. This was the epitome of a 1-1, 0-0, however you want to put it, type game that both teams competed. Neither showed to be well on top of each other. And if anything, on the balance of play, I felt Arsenal had more moments and better territory than Liverpool. But at the end of the day, Liverpool have done the business, getting their moment of magic, and they walk out in their home stadium with a win, which is great for them. It's our responsibility to do the same at the Emirates. If it's a game in which we have a 50-50, it's us to then make those moments come. And as far as the season goes, I will end on this. Berta has given us a squad and a chance for me to be cocky. Personally, that's where I'm at. And I am a lot more looking at Mikel this year in terms of, I think that there were things that are out of his control. But even now, when I look at some of the injuries that we've got, like, mate, like, you've bought the replacements. It's now your squad. I can't sit there and try to make an excuse where if there's something crazy, like Bakayo's out for the rest of the season, that happened to Salah, I would be saying the same thing. Like, it's idiotic to expect them to win a major trophy. But bar something absolutely fantastical like that, I'm looking at a lot of our ideas of squad management, the earlier subs. I'm being harsher. I'm saying, well, you deserve to get that criticism because now you've got a squad to do it.
Yep.
And, after this international break, everybody's going to be in charge. I'm hoping that we get a lot more good news in terms of some of our injuries returning. And the squad looks ready, mate. I don't care that we have a crazy fixture in moments, but the squad looks ready and I'm confident. And I'm sorry, but this has to be the year for me too. Like, I'm with a lot of people. I understand the frustrations, but I think we're able to more concretely find the problems. They've become more clear. Finally, the off the pitch decision-making has brought us to a point in which that no longer can be in question.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we did that last year. Last year, to me, there was too many off the pitch concerns and things that went wrong. And so we didn't do that this year. And I'm excited, despite this being a post-mortem of Liverpool, as I like to call it. Tough game, and I'm feeling bad because of the result, but I'm feeling confident with the boys. There was a lot of things, and some of our buys, I think, having really good performances have helped me. And even people that have come back, like Calafiori, who we didn't see last year, having such a brilliant start. Mascara, his introduction. Nani Madueke, brilliant cameos and starts. giving me confidence that some of the margins we didn't see last year have shown physical improvement. And let's just hope to see whether or not that continues after the break. But what do you think, kind of on a wrap up?
Yeah, just to wrap up, and just quickly on one of the questions that were on the Discord from Dinny, and we've kind of touched in on it in terms of the squad, etc. So we've hoped we've covered that question from you. But yeah, like I'm very optimistic. As I have to say, all three of us are more glass half full as opposed to glass half empty types. But I'm very happy with the fact that I can now sit here and look at Mikel. And criticise him more for certain decisions, because I felt that it was difficult for me to do so last season because of the injuries that were the driver for me in terms of influencing a lot of the outcomes that we saw last season. Whereas this season, like I said, we have not sat here once and made the injury excuse for Arsenal losing that game against Liverpool. Not once. Havertz was out. We could easily do it, George. Havertz was out. Odegaard was out. It wasn't fully fit. Saka was out. Saliba goes down after 2 minutes. I could easily have come here and I could have gone with that straight away. But I'm not going to do that, because there's no reason to that, because the players that we brought in, yes, they're of lesser quality, but they were brought in for this reason. Madueke was brought in to ensure that when Saka is out, he can allow us to still have that impact on the right-hand side. And he showed what he was capable of in a lot of moments, But the driver for me with this game was due to a magic moment. And, I'm definitely going to rewatch it. I'll definitely share more thoughts that I'd have of it. But overall, I'm very optimistic with the season. I think what's key now is we've got Forest, we've got Man City and Newcastle first in the Premier League in our next set of games. It's about not allowing clusters to build. That's really key for me. We need to react quickly. I think Forest is a nice start, and I'm glad it's the early kickoff. Just get it out of the way, get a 3-4-0 win, and then we go again. And yeah, I'm very optimistic for this season. And I think we've put ourselves in a good position in terms of squad wise and being able to give Mikel the tools to navigate through fixtures.
Absolutely. And I think that's a brilliant place to tie it off. So guys, thank you so much for tuning with us. I hope that this provided some therapy and helped people that were struggling from the result from Sunday, of course. And if you guys do like a lot of the content, we got a bunch of stuff coming. We just did, a random pod with @PhysioScout on X that was brilliant to talk about through injuries. We've got, of course, rewatches that we will be bringing back into play. Scouted's coming up. Of course, TCP Live, where you can find Rohan, who's brilliant, along with Alex down there. And we've got youth pods. Data pods will probably be back once we get a little bit more data.
The sample size, not analysing free game XGs. Goodness me.
Gonna say. When we have a sample size, we'll be able to bring that. And of course, guys, we appreciate all of your comments, your lovely support, which has been brilliant throughout the summer. And let's continue. We go onward and upward. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us. And thanks for keeping it Arsenal.
Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. This was one kind of queue the ladies thoroughly enjoyed.
Electrifying. Inspiration.